Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to talk about Genesis 3, verse 10. And he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself. This verse is the first human verbal response to God's call. It is the moment the voice of man, no longer in perfect alignment, emerges in the Torah. According to the Zohar, this is not merely confession, but a revelation of the new state of fallen consciousness, fear, fragmentation, shame, and concealment. It reflects the soul's condition when it becomes aware of its distance from the divine and attempts to justify its absence. The first phrase we have, I heard your voice in the garden. Echo without integration. Adam does not say, I saw you, but I heard your voice, an indirect connection. In Zoharic symbolism, seeing represents direct, supernal perception, clear inner knowing. Hearing represents externalized awareness, receiving filtered truth. Now, the divine presence is no longer immediate. Adam experiences God as a voice, not as radiant presence. His hearing was not with joy, but trembling, because the vessels were no longer fit for light. The next phrase we have, and I was afraid, the birth of fear. This is the first mention of fear, yareh, in the Torah. But this is not holy awe, in Hebrew, yirah, the fear that leads to reverence. This is egoic fear, fear of judgment, exposure, annihilation. Before the sin, Adam was transparent before the divine. Fear did not exist, for there was no separation. Now, fear arises because the soul perceives God as other and itself as vulnerable, broken, and unworthy. Fear entered the world only when men's vessels cracked. This fear is the archetypal reaction of the ego to the presence of holiness it can no longer contain. The next phrase from the verse we have, because I was naked. Awareness of deficiency. Adam identifies his fear not with sin, but with nakedness, the absence of light, the loss of his kutonet, garment of light. Kabbalistically, nakedness here implies lack of spiritual protection, loss of the light of Keter, exposure to the external forces that now cling to the soul. The Zohar says Adam does not truly understand the depth of the fall. He only perceives its outer symptom. He feared not because of what he did, but because of what he became. Next, we have the phrase, so I hid myself. Retreat into illusion. Adam's solution is not repentance, but hiding, a primitive attempt to escape divine presence. This reflects the first instance of avoidance. Rather than return to God in Teshuvah, Adam withdraws. The soul, ashamed of its nakedness, seeks shelter outside of truth. The Zohar teaches this is the moment where the soul created distance, not God. The man hid not just from God, but from his own essence. He buried the divine image beneath fear and shame, which would take generations to cleanse. The mystical reading of this verse, the voice echoes, the soul trembles. The Zohar interprets Adam's trembling at hearing God's voice as the soul's inability to contain light after the fall. Once, the soul sang in harmony with the divine voice. Now, it echoes hollowly, vibrating with guilt, disconnection, and inner contraction. He feared the voice, not because it condemned, but because it revealed. The divine voice stirs truth within, and the unprepared soul trembles, not from punishment, but from the sudden exposure of its inner fragmentation. Deeper implication, the shift from union to separation. This entire verse illustrates the psychic and spiritual inversion that occurred due to the sin. Before the fall, presence felt as warmth. After the fall, presence felt as threat. Before the fall, nakedness as transparency. After the fall, nakedness as shame. Before the fall, God as union. After the fall, God as judgment. Before the fall, soul as open vessel. After the fall, soul as hidden self. The Zohar reads this as the beginning of exile, not just from Eden, but from the inner divine image. Adam speaks, but his words reflect distance, confusion, and a soul no longer aligned with its source. To summarize, Genesis 3 verse 10 is the first human response to the divine call, and it reveals the full psychological and spiritual impact of the fall. The phrase, "I heard your voice in the garden," no longer radiant presence, only voice. God is now perceived from a distance, filtered through the broken vessel. The phrase, "and I was afraid," the first fear in history, not reverence, but fear of exposure, of judgment, of being seen without covering. The phrase, "because I was naked," Adam now identifies with lack. His divine light has fled. He sees himself no longer as a soul, but as a deficient being. The phrase, "so I hid myself," instead of returning, he retreats, the first avoidance, the birth of spiritual concealment. The Zohar teaches that this verse encapsulates the soul's reaction every time it distances from God. Hearing becomes trembling, light becomes unbearable, the soul turns away, not because God rejects it, but because it no longer recognizes its own light. And yet, even in this fear, the voice of Adonai still echoes, inviting return. The beginning of Teshuvah, return, is not perfection, but the courage to step out of hiding. That's it for today. Thank you very much for your donation. Be blessed, everyone, and I will see you on the next episode.